So here I am now so delighted to have Reverend Brendalyn with us in our sanctuary, up on our pulpit. Blessings. We cannot hear you. We cannot hear you.
I know. I'm trying to unmute. Okay. So we now have the candles both on Zoom and in the sanctuary. So that's great. We don't have to worry about holding the other device for the candles in the sanctuary. So I don't know how many of you know the story of Unity, but our co-founder, Myrtle Fillmore, sat in the silence in every evening for an hour. And her husband, our Unity co-founder, Charles Fillmore, witnessed her physical healing and how she helped other people heal. And he had studied all the major religions and philosophies of the world. And he, there were some things that weren't clear, they weren't consistent or whatever. So he began sitting in the silence for an hour every evening, and he was unbelieving. Unbelieving, but he did it anyway, okay? And so he eventually had a healing as well, and so the silence, sitting in the silence, meditation is an important practice to do. And Charles Fillmore called it going to headquarters. I like that, going to headquarters. So as I prepared to retire from Unity Santa Fe almost a year ago, I realized that I was reading a book, and all of a sudden I knew what my new purpose in life would be. And that new purpose would be to deepen my spiritual life. And I was so excited because certainly serving as the Unity Santa Fe minister for almost 20 years deepened my spiritual life. But in retirement, which I like to call rewirement, I could rewire my life and more fully deepen my spiritual life, because I would no longer have the distraction of what I came to call ad ministry. Those administrative aspects of pulpit ministry that include finances, facilities, staffing, program management, service logistics, paperwork. So now, the primary way I deepen my spiritual life is through my meditation practice, my unified mindfulness meditation, through classes I prepare for, through Sunday services like I'm giving now. And I don't have to be distracted by all that other stuff, which is very important stuff. So the human condition for today's message that I want to address is thinking or acting as if meditation is only a formal, on-the-cushion practice. And the spiritual solution to that human condition is what I like to call, and I actually got it from my teacher, Shinzen Young, monasticizing your life. Monasticizing your life by practicing meditation both on and off the cushion, anywhere, anytime, as briefly as a few seconds or for as long as you desire. So what would be in it for you? What's in it for me to practice mindfulness meditation all the time? It's really what St. Paul called praying without ceasing. I finally found a way to pray without ceasing. So Shinzen Young developed what he calls the happiness grid. And there's 5 columns, and some days in class and stuff, we'll talk about these 5 columns where you can literally rate yourself and see pretty much the degree of your happiness. And so the areas, the 5 columns that have degrees of happiness are, the first column's minimize suffering. You know, would you sign up to minimize your suffering? All right. Would you like to, second column, maximize your fulfillment? Okay. Would you like to know yourself not only as a human being, but your divinity? Really experience your divinity? Would you like to be able to act skillfully in all areas of your life, whether as a parent, a hobby, a career? And the 5th column is to be connected, blessing the world, all your relationships, people you know and don't know, through love and service. I don't know about you, but I can't imagine anybody not realizing that by developing in those areas, I'm happier, and so are you. Now, in December 2017, a friend of mine introduced me to a book by Shinzen Young. Shinzen is like 2 words. The shin of your leg, you know, your lower leg, your shin, and Zen, the Buddhist practice of Zen. Okay, so his name is Shinzen. He's actually an ordained Buddhist monk, but he doesn't wear robes and all that. He's like a householder. He's a real out there in the world, and he's also a scientist. And through his book, The Science of Enlightenment, and many, 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 many YouTubes, you just have to put in Shinzen Young and all these YouTubes will come up, I began satiating my intellect because he was giving me a scientific understanding of meditation and why we do it, not just mystically, but really explaining sort of the mysticism that happens. And he explained to me, or in these videos, this huge physical and psychological breakthrough that I had the first time I went on a 10-day silent Vipassana meditation course. It had happened 11 years earlier, and I had never understood it. And I don't have time in this short message to talk about it in detail, but basically, I was having a very difficult time. My first 7 days of meditation of the course, I couldn't sit still. I was like a fish out of water. And I would peek my eyes open, which we weren't supposed to do. And everybody else in the room looked like a stone Buddha. You know, nobody was moving but me. And on the 8th day, that morning, I decided that no matter what they say, I'm gonna practice, I'm gonna do whatever they say, no matter what, I'm really gonna follow the instructions today. Well, what a day to follow the instructions, because the instructions for our 1.5 hour mid-morning sit was to sit without moving. And I was like, oh no, and this was like for an hour and a half. So I made a decision. I'm going to sit without moving. And basically what happened is I experienced excruciating pain, but I didn't move because he said we were supposed to observe it with equanimity. He actually used the word equanimous. He said you should observe whatever's happened equanimously. So I sat and I was in absolute physical misery, but mentally, I tried to say, okay, I'm just going to sit here. And basically what happened was I had a psychological breakthrough. When I didn't move, I had all this repressed stuff about an incident in my childhood, and it was shown to me. It was like on my visual screen. And I realized that it was, I thought it was anger, and then I realized, no, it's rage about something that had happened to me when a girl jumped me from behind and tried to beat me up. And I had somehow turned it around and was able to not get hurt. And I was declared the victor. So in my little 8th grade mind, I was so happy everybody thought I was cool that I never experienced that rage. It had been stuffed in my body all those years. And when I sat without moving, it broke through. And now I can sit without back support. I can sit with my back to the door, not worried about somebody jumping me from behind. It was life-changing, incredible, but I never understood what happened. All I was told by that teacher was that this is called sankharas. It's a Pali term, and he called them gross solidified sensations. My teacher now, Shinzen, calls them undigested karma, which I really love that term. So that every time there's discomfort in sitting in meditation, every time I would move, I kept those from coming up. I kept pushing them down, pushing them down. But when I sat without moving for that amount of time, and it probably wasn't that long because it started right away, then somehow my body was able to release those because I wasn't distracting myself, and I was able to allow those gross solidified sensation, that undigested karma, to be released. And so I learned that it's called purification. It doesn't have to be that painful. When we sit in meditation and thoughts come up, people say, oh, I can't meditate, I keep thinking too much. Well, that's great. You just have to let the thoughts come and go. You don't hold on to them. You don't set up camp in them. You don't build a condo in those thoughts. Rather, every time you're able to let them just go, you are purifying your mind. So now, after learning about the science of enlightenment and unified mindfulness, I find that my spiritual life continues to be deepened as I continue developing my skills of concentration, sensory clarity, and equanimity, and practice these many techniques that are available. And the biggest thing that has happened to me happened in January of this year. I was on a Zoom retreat, and I had a lot of physical pain. I had pain in my neck. And I began using the unified mindfulness techniques to focus on the pain instead of trying to make it go away, to just be present to the pain. I actually used my heart math breathing technique where I breathed as if I was breathing through the pain. And I would find within a minute or so, the pain would totally disappear. And then it would come back. So it took me 6 days of it coming and going through, sometimes a couple hours. I would have a break of a couple hours and then it would come back. But eventually it absolutely has disappeared. And it didn't happen again for about 2 months when I was bragging about it to somebody. Got my ego involved and telling my spiritual director how I had healed this pain, and it came back. But this time it only took me a couple of days to get rid of it. And then the next time I experienced it was on my trip to Montreal, and while I was in Buffalo. For some reason, the pain came back. I was sleeping on a different pillow. I don't know what it was, but the pain came back. And this time it only took, a few times of focusing on it, and it totally disappeared. And knock on wood, it hasn't been back since. So Shinzen, it helped me understand something that he calls this formula, because he's a scientist. And he says pain times resistance equals suffering. So when we have pain and we're trying to make it go away and moaning and groaning about it and really being upset about it emotionally, we suffer. But he says pain times equanimity equals purification. So if we can be present to the pain, we can allow it to pass. We can allow it to dissolve into the nothingness from which it came. So these two formulas are no longer theoretical to me because I've experienced them. I also experienced them with allergies. I was in Santa Fe. We have a lot of seasonal allergies, and I was suffering. And I realized and checked it out with the lead teacher in Unified Mindfulness that this resistance was emotional. The pain was physical, but the resistance was emotional. So I was able to find the pain was everywhere in my head, my ears, my nose, my sinuses, my throat, my mouth, you name it, were the physical symptoms. But when I tried to find the emotions, the resistance, it was in my chest. So I realized, oh, I don't have equanimity. I'm fighting. I'm pushing and pulling. The Buddhists call it aversion. I'm pushing and pulling, trying to make it go away. So I just began observing that lack of equanimity. And then I began feeling more equanimity. And eventually, I felt total equanimity with the emotions. Then I went back to focus on the symptoms, and guess what? I think they were still there, but they didn't bother me anymore. So I now have an experience of how to purify my emotions and how those emotions are really what causes the pain to be worse. It's not the pain, it's the emotions behind it. So over these next 3 weeks, I'm hoping to teach all of you who come to Sunday service and to classes how to do this. So I've been talking about Shinzen, and I just want to mention he's been a spiritual teacher for over 50 years. He is an ordained Zen monk, and he's also a neuroscience research consultant and the author of The Science of Enlightenment and many, many, many YouTubes. And I call Shinzen the Charles Fillmore of contemplative practice. Because if you know about our co-founder, our Unity co-founder, Charles Fillmore, as I said earlier, he studied all the spiritual paths, all the faith traditions, the philosophies, all of that. And from them, he brought them together into what we now know as unity. Likewise, Shenzhen Yang developed the unified mindfulness system by incorporating practices from all contemplative traditions to offer people very clear instructions and a lot of flexibility. So Shinzen is both a spiritual teacher and a scientist, and his system, the Unified Mindfulness System, is known for both its precision and its adaptability. So his techniques are currently used in major research on meditation, including prestigious organizations such as Harvard and Carnegie Mellon, among many others, because his process is so specific that they can measure it, okay? Now, before Unified Mindfulness, my meditation practice was really just on the cushion. You know what I mean by on the cushion? Sitting in silence with my eyes closed, And I would get so bored with these single techniques. So for years, I did centering prayer, and I love Father Keating, if any of you know Father Keating and centering prayer. And I love that practice. And he did bring in the psychological aspects that we have this purification that happens. And I understood that on a certain level. Shinzen is just taking me to a deeper understanding of it. So for those of you who may not know, centering prayer, you repeat a sacred word of your choice anytime your mind is distracted from the sacred word, okay? And you sit generally for 20 minutes twice a day. And they also have walking meditation. for 20 minutes at a time. Well, after a number of years, I heard about this program called Vipassana through a teacher called S.N. Goenka, Goenke. And I attended my first ever meditation retreat, and it was 10 days. 10 days of not only not speaking, but we weren't allowed to have any eye contact. We weren't allowed to listen to music, read books, write journaling, nothing. All we were allowed to do was to be totally what I call self-absorbed. We had to just be totally present. And boy, then's when I understood why the Buddhists call it the monkey mind. Wow. I've never experienced so much thoughts in my life because I didn't have anything to distract me from them. Okay, so during the first 3 days, and we sat for about 10 hours a day, not continuously, but throughout the day, 10 hours a day. And for the first 3 days, those 10 hours were spent developing our concentration skill by focusing by a practice called Anapana. And it's where you focus just on the breath going into the nostrils and coming out. You don't follow it all the way down, just the sensation of it entering the nostril and then the sensation of it exiting the nostrils. And that really does help develop concentration skills. Then the next 7 days, we practiced body scanning. And that's what we did for the rest of our experience of Vipassana. Forever. I've been to 7 courses, and that's what you do each time. And so during those 10 hours, we would start at the top of our head and we scanned our body very slowly, all the way down to bring our awareness and our concentration to sensation, body sensation. And after the course, we were encouraged to practice body scanning twice a day for an hour each, so 2 hours a day. Well, after a number of years, I got so tired of body scanning. I just felt like I was going to scream if I had to scan my body one more time. So I took the Transcendental Meditation course, and I was given a mantra by the teacher. And for 20 minutes twice a day, very similar to centering prayer, but I focused on a mantra that had been given to me. Boring. I mean, I got so bored after a number, you do this for so many years. I mean, there's people who've done it for 40, 50 years and they aren't bored, but I've got an active mind and my mind was bored. So when I discovered unified mindfulness, it was like a breath of fresh air, because unified mindfulness includes core skills, the concentration, sensory clarity, equanimity, and by practicing techniques from every contemplative tradition. So you have a buffet, you have a toolkit, and depending on the circumstances, depending on your need, your interest, you pick a tool. And you can use as many tools as you want for as long as you want. And nobody's going to tell you which tool to use when. The time required, Shinzen encourages a minimum of 10 minutes, formal practice. Either sitting, because formal practice can also be in motion. You're going to learn how you can have formal meditation practice while you're walking, driving, while you're doing sports, all kinds of stuff. You can have your formal meditation skill for people who cannot sit in motion. So 10 minutes minimum. You can expand it as long as you want. I personally practice an hour and a half every day because I love it so much. So I sit from 8 Eastern time, 8:30 a.m. to 10 o'clock with a group on Zoom. And then you can practice as many micro hits throughout the day as you want. So a micro hit is, guess what? From 3 seconds up to 10 minutes. 10 minutes or more is a formal practice. A few seconds to 10 minutes is an informal practice. So you could also do that walking, driving, waiting in line at the grocery store, a doctor's office, whatever. Shinzen says, when you learn these techniques, you never have an excuse to be unproductive again. Because you could be productive by being mindful and developing these core skills of concentration, sensory clarity, and equanimity wherever you are. And the techniques, the core techniques are see, hear, feel, and I've already introduced you somewhat to those. There's see, hear, feel in, and there's see, feel, hear out, and we're going to be talking a lot about that in Wednesday night's class. There's see, hear, feel rest. There's see, hear, feel flow. There's see, hear, feel spaciousness. There's see, hear, feel good. Then there's auto think, auto speak, auto move, and auto focus. There is do nothing. You get to a point where you can actually sit and do nothing and not be bored. And in unified mindfulness, you can customize your own techniques. And so I'm constantly learning new techniques from my colleagues because I'm now a teacher of unified mindfulness, and I've created my own. I've included something called the don't know altar. When you put something you don't know on the altar and you give it to spirit. I've created something called pen cleanse, which is sort of auto writing along the lines of my friend Julia Cameron. And it's unlimited. People are developing customized techniques using these techniques. It's just amazing. Now, and I like to bring this to prayer chaplaincy. For any of you who've ever prayed for another person, the way I used to train our prayer chaplains was that it's important to do what Joel Goldsmith says, learn the letter of the law. Okay, he says, in his case, he was primarily talking about scripture. And he says, once you know the letter of the law, then whatever you need will be revealed to you at the time. It becomes auto speak, if you will. So prayer chaplains learn our unity principles, the 12 powers, the 5 basic principles, all those principles. And once you know those principles, when someone asks you for prayer, you just speak it. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to figure out what to say. Spirit speaks through you automatically. So this is a very practical in terms of those of you who are prayer chaplains, but it's true for any. I seem to do better at auto writing. So when I'm preparing for my Sunday message, I write it out. I'm doing auto think, and I'm putting it on paper, sort of auto write. And then when I speak, I've got my notes and I stick to them to the extent that I want to. And I, like what I'm saying right now isn't in my notes today. So I do a combination of checking my script and auto speak. So how do we do this? How do we deepen our spiritual life? How do we really have an experience of our divinity? How do we heal? Well, prayer and meditation is always the first how-to. And in this case, it's about being mindfully present in both formal and informal practice, using the techniques that I'm going to be teaching you. And so in order to do that, I invite you to attend the Wednesday evening class in person here in the sanctuary or via Zoom, and experientially learn these techniques. And we'll start with what we call a tour of the senses, and the senses being see, hear, and feel. So I celebrate that as a result of today's message, you and I have the wisdom to practice being mindfully present to the presence God is in everything we see, hear, and feel, both on and off the cushion. So let's begin practicing the presence right now in a sacred time of shared prayer and meditation. I'm just going to take a sip. So I invite us to take a moment to straighten up to Father Sky and settle into Mother Earth, relaxing the shoulders and jaw. Just being present to this moment. And I want to invite you, if your eyes are already closed, to just open them and allow yourself to focus and concentrate on one thing that you see. And just hold your focus there for a few seconds. Really seeing what you're seeing, and then either continue looking at that or look at something else that you see in your environment. And just focus on it for a few moments. And then you can change and look at something else or the same thing for a few moments. And you've been practicing see out, seeing outside yourself. Now, if you're comfortable doing so, close your eyes and be aware of what you may or may not be seeing, either on your mental screen or behind your eyelids. You may not see anything, or you may see scenes. You may just see shades of black and gray behind your eyelids. It doesn't matter. This is called see in. And so now, having practiced see out and see in, we're going to shift to hearing. So take a moment and focus on one thing that you hear, either in your environment, or you may hear your tummy gurgling or your ears ringing or something like that. It's all considered hear out. And just as we did with seeing, focus on it for a few seconds. And then focus on the same thing again or something different for a few seconds. Really hear it. And now shift from hear out to hear in. And hear in is thoughts, self-talk, monkey mind, whatever you want to call it. Just be aware and focus on whatever self-talk may or may not be happening in your mind. And again, you focus for a few seconds and then see if something else comes. Or you may just have no sound at all, which is also hear in. You're hearing into the silence. So now that you've experienced hear out and hear in, I invite you to focus on one thing that you are physically feeling. It could be your feet in your shoes, your clothing on your skin, your bottom on the seat of the chair, whatever you physically feel. And in the same way, just focus on it for a few seconds and then focus on it again or on something different that you physically feel. And so that is how we feel out. Now I want you to take a moment to be aware of any emotions that you may be feeling. Emotions are feeling peace, happy, sad, glad, tired, energized. Be aware of any feeling, emotional feelings that you may have. And again, focus on it for a few seconds, then refocus on it or on a different feeling. Because there are physical sensations that accompany the emotions. Now I want to invite you to do this on your own for a few moments, just freely floating between see in or out, hear in or out, feel in or out, your choice at your own pace in the silence. And as we gently bring our attention back to this time and space, silently hear in and hear yourself silently saying, "Thank you, I am that I am," for the wisdom to practice being mindfully present to your presence in your world, in everything I see, hear, and feel, both on and off the cushion. Thank you. I am that I am. Thank you, thank you, thank you, that it is so that I am so, and so it is. Amen.